And we are live with another edition of the All Gas No Break Sports Show. I am one of your co-hosts, Nicholas Bavona, joined alongside once again by Andrew Johnson. And Andrew, we are now getting to the home stretch of the second half of this MLB season as the trade deadline has just passed as of yesterday around 6 p.m. The final trades and transactions of this MLB season have been concluded. And now we get a picture of some of the teams that have bought in, some of the teams that are now selling going into the future, and how these teams that have bought in can maybe have an impactful second half of the season as they all try to win a World Series championship this year.
Yeah, absolute pandemonium at the deadline here. Lots of top guys going to new homes. Teams that we thought were going to be sellers were buyers, and teams that we thought were going to be buyers are now sellers. So I guess we should just really jump right into it, Nick. Where would you like to start?
I'm trying not to start with the obvious one for myself and obviously for you. I'll try to go around that. We'll get to that one eventually because I know it's going to be a big trade. That's so far has made a nice impact for my team. There's a lot to think about how this deadline went down. I mean, you have the Padres making some big moves for relievers. They got Jason Adam from the Rays. They obviously got Tanner Scott from the Miami Marlins, which was a good deal also for Miami, I think, in my opinion, Johnson. I know, obviously, you have mixed feelings about them right now.
No longer a fan, but we'll get into that later.
We'll get into that in just a moment, yeah. But yeah, I like, even though the Marlins might be on your bad side, I like what they did this deadline in terms of, acquiring those prospects and maybe building towards the future. The best deal I thought that they did was the Trevor Rogers deal with Baltimore.
That was an absolute steal. They
got Connor Norby and Kyle Stowers, who could immediately get inserted right now into the Marlins lineup. That's a pretty much a home run deal. And Rogers, yes, has had an up and down season, but that does also help the Orioles because they do need a left-handed starter in that bullpen not in the bullpen, in the rotation, the way, John Means has had his injury history, so they need another left-handed starter, and that definitely helps them. We also have Josh Bell going to the Diamondbacks. That's especially big now considering Christian Walker, who just got injured as of this Monday. He'll be going on the IL, so that's a big move for the Diamondbacks, getting him as well. I guess we'll go into that trade, Johnson, that, now has you not much of a Marlins fan anymore. The Jazz Chisholm trade. Remember when we talked about this a couple weeks ago when we were discussing the first half, second half of the season, that this was a possibility of Jazz getting traded going into this deadline. And unfortunately for Marlins fans, including your former self, Jazz was traded to the New York Yankees. The Marlins did get a nice haul for him in this return. Augustin Ramirez, the big name in this one prospect-wise. I think he was the third-ranked prospect for the Yankees going into their prospect system. And Jazz has already made a nice impact for the Yankees. He's already hit 4 home runs, and I think 3 or 4 games he's already played with the team. They've won 5 straight games as well, so Jazz has made a nice impact so far for the Yankees in his short term, and they're hoping that will help them in the second half of the season. But the one common theme that we saw, Johnson, for this Marlins team was selling those assets that they have right now, and unfortunately have to build for the future because it's just been a rough 2024 season they've had.
One thing I do want to say about Jazz, even though he is an average hitter during his time in Miami, and I will say he was average because he had that one All-Star season a couple years ago where he got injured, and unfortunately, so let's say he took a full year to recover. So let's just get rid of that 2023 season. Then this is his first full year, I guess, away from that injury where he kind of looks a little bit more normal. And this is the captivating thing about a big media market. Jazz was out there in Miami playing in front of 8,000 to 9,000 fans on any given night. When the Yankees are in town, or if Dodgers are in town, then you'd have 30,000 fans in that stadium. But he was in a stadium where the fans didn't hold him accountable, the media didn't hold him accountable, his teammates didn't hold him accountable. So he was able just to kind of hang out down there. All of a sudden, goes to the largest media market in the world. Some of the best and worst fans, where they will, if you are a hero, they will cheer you till the end of time. Look at guys like even Eli Manning or Walt Clyde Frazier. They will forever be revered in the city of New York for what they did here and the championships they brought for those respective organizations. When you look at guys like Jeter or I was going to say A-Rod, but that's a mixed bag for a lot of people.
A-Rod's very hit or miss with Yankee fans. I mean, they had that 109, one season in 09, but the rest of it was very tumultuous time.
This is going to sound kind of crazy.
All that. Yeah, the core four.
This is going to sound crazy. But Jazz is finally going to a team where they're going to hold him accountable because you've seen the flashes in Miami, right?
Yeah.
You've seen like, oh yeah, he's good. He could be a lot better. You know what this could really turn out to be like? Remember when Paul O'Neill got traded from Cincinnati to the Yankees?
Yeah. And Paul
He
O'Neill is
had
regarded as one,
he
a
had
great
those
player.
flashes of like, oh, he could be an all-star, but can never really put together. He got put in a big media market and became one of the better Yankees during that 90s period where he made multiple all-star games. He was part of multiple World Series runs.
Yeah.
And he's revered still in the city of New York, even though he was like, whatever, he was an above average player
Yeah,
in
like
Cincinnati.
I'd say
But when he
Hall of
came to New
very
York,
good.
yeah,
That's
he
really
was
what
a
you can
he
describe.
had a Hall of very good career as a Yankee.
Right.
I believe he was a Monument Park
He was a good red.
honoree too, right?
Right, like he was a solid red. I think he won a
But
World
he was a
Series in
great
Cincinnati,
Yankee.
but he really made his impact as a Yankee. Like people remember him for all the stuff he did with the Yankees. Most I
Yeah,
would think so
yeah,
mostly.
absolutely. But he was just another guy in Cincinnati. Like, oh yeah, he's
Right.
good. You'd see him, but then he became a Yankee. It's like, whoa, like he started to finally put it together. He had his best seasons as a Yankee, and if you're Jazz, but he adds a completely different dynamic to his team. Yankees are one of the worst base running. I shouldn't say base running teams.
No,
One of the
they struggle with speed on their team. They are a
yes,
very
they are
slow team.
almost dead last in stolen bases, and this is a guy that has almost 20 on the season.
Yeah.
So Jazz alone almost has half to what the Yankees have in the season right now. So you saw it in that Phillies game where he pretty much just on his speed alone when they were in that slump, he got a run.
Right.
Like the Yankees couldn't hit anything. Jazz, he got the second, and then he stole third, based off really good situational awareness. And then when they had that sac fly by I think it was DJ LeMahieu, they wouldn't have gotten that if
Yeah.
Jazz didn't have that speed. So he's creating offense already for the Yankees in ways that they weren't creating before.
And I think another good thing about it is that you mentioned that he's very versatile also because obviously he came up as an infielder. The Marlins moved him to the outfield, and now he can play both. He can play those positions pretty well. And right now, the Yankees are experimenting him at third base. It's the first time in his career he's been playing third base, and so far it's been good for the Yankees. It hasn't really hurt them just yet. Obviously, just 2 games in so far, so we'll have to see how it goes over time. But we've also seen him in the outfield. He made some nice plays at Fenway in his first game out in center field, which is great because you know that the Yankees are not going to put Judge and Soto out in the outfield every single day. They're going to want to move them around, and having Jazz that definitely helps them in that sense. So that's a great point as well. And I think that was a guy. Obviously, if the Yankees got him, that's great. If it went to a different team like the Dodgers, which we were hoping it wouldn't, then I'd be a little bit salty about it because the Dodgers, we know that their team already is stacked as it is, and they didn't, adding a guy like that would be even more overkill. However, the Dodgers, though, they were also active at this deadline. They had guys like Tommy Edman, Michael Kopech from the White Sox. They got Ahmed Rosario for the second straight season at the deadline, which is another guy that plays both infield and outfield as well as Tommy Edman. And then, of course, they got Jack Flaherty from the Detroit Tigers, the top, I wouldn't say the top pitcher available because there was guys like Crochet and Schoolball maybe being rumored around to being traded. But it seemed as
Probably
if
the top pitcher traded.
yeah, they're definitely the top pitcher traded. It seemed as if Schoolball and Crochet, the offer for those teams, they weren't getting what they wanted in terms of prospect haul, so that's why they weren't moved at this deadline. But the Dodgers still get Flaherty, which definitely helps because obviously they're dealing with a lot of injuries and their pitching rotation. They just recently got back Clayton Kershaw. Bueller is still hurt. May is still hurt. I think they just recently Tyler Glasnow was hurt for a little bit of time. Just recently came back as well. So adding another guy like Flaherty, who's had a nice season for the Tigers, is definitely going to help bolster their rotation. I almost forgot Yamamoto is still out as well. Yeah, it's a good haul for them and for Detroit. I mean, they're still trying to rebuild. They're kind of like they were one of those teams that we were talking about going into our preview of the second half that they're not there just yet, but you're starting to see the inklings of they're getting towards that next push that they need, and adding some prospects might help them now as maybe they try to make a potential trade if they have a better second half, or not better second half, a better 2025 season next season for them. But For the Dodgers, it's just normal as usual, Johnson. They're going to go all in to try to get another
How
World
could they
Championship.
afford this team? I know the obvious answer is, they deferred Shohei's contract, but it's just crazy that they can afford this.
I know. I don't remember what Flaherty got paid in the offseason. I don't think it was a lot of money.
He got a proof-it deal.
Yeah,
It wasn't a lot of money.
I think he, like, the same thing with Rosario. Like, he didn't get paid. Like, remember, Rosario wasn't signed for a minute. And then I think, like, maybe 2 weeks before the season started, Tampa Bay gave him, like, a 1-year, $3 million deal. So that's why the Dodgers can afford him. I don't think Tommy Edmonds getting paid that much either. He's still technically injured right now. He's still rehabbing from an injury that's cost them the entire season so far. So the Dodgers aren't getting Edmonds just yet, but that's a great addition. I think that's one of the more under the radar moves of the deadline because I think Tommy Edmonds is definitely a very reliable player because he can give you that versatility that I mentioned with Jazz. He's the same type of player as well as Ahmed Rosario. They both now go to the Dodgers, and they both can play the infield and the outfield. So if you wanted to move Mookie Betts back out to the outfield when he comes back, you more than certainly can do that once he returns from injury. So the Dodgers look poised to have a very good second half of the season, which a lot of fans are definitely not going to be happy about going forward.
So I want to actually stay in the. I want to go back to the AL East if you could. I want to talk about the Tampa Bay Rays.
Oh, okay. There was a move I actually liked for Tampa. I don't know if it's the same.
So this sellers now. They're could you believe that Tampa Bay is finally selling? A Rosarena gone, Paredes gone.
Yeah, the Paredes deal still. I don't think it boggles my mind as much. At first, it did because it was the team that he went to. Because the Cubs right now are still in last place in the Central. But I understood why they did it now, looking back at it. Yeah, Paredes is still very young. I think he's 25 years old still. So he's still under control for another 2 or 3 seasons under the Cubs. So this is not more of a, you're buying in now on the guy.
He's probably a top 5 third baseman also.
You think he's top 5 third baseman?
I think he is.
It's debatable. I don't hate
third base isn't a strong position even. He's having a good season.
Yeah, he's had a really good season. He was a former All-Star. I think he made the All-Star team this year or was last season. I don't remember. The move I liked from them also, I know that he hasn't had the best career, and maybe the change of scenery could help. And listen, I've seen Tampa Bay get diamonds out of some guys that we haven't really heard of, and sometimes guys we have heard of, but haven't panned out in other scenarios. They got Dylan Carlson from the Cardinals. They traded Sean Armstrong to get him. And you got to think about Carlson, obviously, as I mentioned, hasn't had the best career. But I think going now to a different situation where you'll probably play a little bit more now in Tampa, you're going to replace guys like Rosarena. Definitely big shoes to fill, but the change of scenery definitely could help him down the line of his MLB career. And for the Cardinals, Armstrong is a nice serviceable veteran reliever for a bullpen as they try to make a push to make the playoffs this season as well. But yeah, Tampa Bay, it's definitely surprising. I mentioned it at our second half preview. I thought that they would probably be in that tier of maybe selling at this deadline because they were even a 500 team. There was a lot of teams ahead of them in the race. They definitely could have made a push towards the second half. But I think they're just dealing with so many injuries. McClanahan's been out for the entire season. We obviously know, what happened with their other star player, which I won't go into. But yeah, Tampa Bay's just in a weird spot right now. They're not really they don't really have the next factor to make them into a playoff team. I think they're just middle of the pack. They're not really going to be able to make a push for the rest of the season. They're going to have to look forward to the next couple of years.
So there's another thing I want to mention. I want to talk about the Padres going for the bullpen work here in Miami.
I love what they did though with the deadline. They did a lot of good things.
First of all, they got Brian Hoering, and they also got Tanner Scott, which is the real gem here. He's probably one of the best. We haven't seen him in a real closer role though yet, so I'm curious to see how that's going to work out.
He probably becomes the starting closer now for that team.
I would have to. So he's had such a phenomenal season, and for the Marlins bullpen, which was horrific for the last couple of years, he's been on fire this year, and it's a shame because he hasn't had a chance to be a true closer. but he's
Yeah,
got a 1.18 ERA in 45 innings pitched. He has 18 saves on the year. If he was on any other team right now, he'd be the closer
and
in the
Hoeing's had a pretty
MLB.
good year too. 2.70 ERA is not terrible for a
No,
reliever.
they've been very good. And that's why the Miami bullpen, I was kind of surprised. It was the starting pitching this year, which the starting five all got injured. So if
Yeah,
the starting five of Miami, if you have Sandy healthy, if you have Jesus healthy, if you have Max Meyer healthy, if you have Cabrera, if you have all these guys that are healthy, Miami's probably a 500 baseball team. Do they sell at the deadline? They probably still do because they're Miami.
probably yeah.
But they probably don't sell
As much as they
as
did,
much.
they traded 9 times at this deadline. They also traded Brian De La Cruz to the Pirates. With the Pirates, by the way, surprised me. I didn't think they were going to be buyers at this deadline, but I don't know if it's really buying in. I think it was more of getting depth for that team. They got Brian De La Cruz and they got Isaiah Kiner-Falefa, which are nice two additions that are
Yeah,
very
the
nice for
Pirates were of the
their lineup.
assumption that Brian De La Cruz and Jazz Chisholm were comparable. I can assure you, after watching enough Marlins baseball, that they're not. Brian De La Cruz is a fine player, but he is not Jazz.
Um, but going back to that Tanner Scott deal, I mean, look at the haul that the Marlins got in that trade as well. If you look at the prospects that they got as well, they got the number 2 prospect, the number 4 prospect, the number 5 prospect, and the number 24 prospect for 2 relievers. So the Marlins, yes, traded away a lot of their players, but they were able to get a lot of prospects that are highly touted prospects in a lot of farm systems. Even going to the AJ Puck deal with the Diamondbacks. I forgot what number of prospect he was for Arizona, but I saw the numbers for this guy, and I gotta look up his name real quick. I probably butchered his name. Devizan De Los Santos. Here it is. He was the number 14 prospect in Arizona's system. I think he had like 28 home runs or something. Like he was on. Like, people were calling him the Barry Bonds of like Double A or something. And maybe the Marlins turn him. Maybe the Marlins get something out of him. Who
Listen,
knows?
the Marlins are a forever rebuilding team. At least the couple times they've blown it up this bad, they won a World Series the previous year. They forgot to win. You got to win the World Series in between blowing it up like this. So, uh, hey Nick, fun fact: what do you think's more expensive, to have a 60-second ad during the Super Bowl, or to field a baseball team in the year 2024?
It's a Super Bowl ad.
Yeah, it is a Super Bowl ad because that is more expensive than Miami Marlins payroll right
I
now. That
saw
is
that stat on
$13
Twitter.
million.
I saw that stat on Twitter. I thought I was misreading it, but no. I honestly, I think a good quiz would be to tell me who is the highest paid player on that team right now.
So it's $12.5 million, right? Does Avi Garcia's dead money count towards the cat? Does that count?
Technically, yeah. I mean, I'm gonna look at their. I'm gonna go on Spot Rack real quick and see what the payroll is for this team. And
If it's Avi Garcia's dead money, I think it might be up there.
so, okay, I have the number. Do you want to take a guess who it is?
Is it not? Is it active? Like, is it not Avi Garcia?
No, it's not.
It's probably Jesus Sanchez.
It's Jesus Sanchez making
Sanchez, yes.
Sanchez. Sorry, he's making $2.1 million.
That's really bad.
You want to guess who the second highest paid player is?
Is it Jake Berger?
It's Nick Gordon.
You're kidding me.
He's making 900K, and that's the second highest paid player on the Marlins.
That is disgusting.
Yeah, they are just in shambles right now.
Wow.
I think, like I said,
that's beyond bad.
I know you're not a fan of them anymore after the Jazz trade, but I think with their, and we mentioned it also, like them.
Oh wait, is this not counting like Sandy and Jesus because they're injured?
I think they were on that list. Like I think I saw their salaries and they were still low.
Sandy is making way more than Tio Bill.
Maybe it's just active players I was looking at.
I think it's active players because Sandy's out for the year, so it probably doesn't count towards
let me backtrack real quick. One moment. Yeah. Oh. Okay. So my mistake. I'm gonna take credit for this. That was active players highest paid. They actually have the highest paid player in terms of injured list players as well, and they also retain payroll players salary wise. So there's also that. If you want to go into that current active players that they still have, so yeah, Sandy is making $9 million per year, so he is technically the highest paid player left in the Marlins. Josh Bell, who just got traded, as I mentioned, has the highest retained payroll with 14 mil.
So
And then
could
it's
you confirm
yeah,
that Sandy and Jesus Luzardo make more money than the rest of the Marlins roster combined right now?
let's see. So they make a combined 14.5 mil.
Yep, that's it.
That is exactly more than the entire team.
Yep, that is depressing.
Hey, but you're not a fan anymore, right?
Yep, I'm rid of this organization. So
Like it,
Las Vegas Athletics, here we come.
yeah, like I said, if you want to send your flyers at the Johnson and make a fan out of him, go right ahead. We already had one pitch towards him for our team, but it seems like Vegas might be on his mindset, even though they will be in Sacramento technically next season. I'll have to wait for that. The other move I really liked at this deadline, Johnson, was a trade, kind of a interesting trade that happened between two teams that have two of the best records in baseball. That was the trade between Baltimore and Philadelphia. We saw Sir Anthony Dominguez and Christian Pache go to Baltimore, and the Phillies get Austin Hayes. I like this move on both parts of their sides. The Orioles have had an issue this season in terms of bullpen. They really needed that depth. They get Sir Anthony Dominguez, that will certainly help. Christian Pache definitely gives them some outfield depth as well, especially after trading Hayes. And the Phillies need another outfielder for that lineup that especially they could hit left-handed pitching. And Austin Hayes is certainly that guy. I thought twice today he was about to hit a go-ahead home run against the Yankees. Thankfully, he did not. But a nice move for both parts is they're both, as I mentioned, at the top of their respective leagues, or at least Baltimore is about a game behind Cleveland for the best record in the AL. But two of the top five teams record-wise in baseball, and they make a rare. They made actually two trades this week as well, but that was probably the biggest one they made out of the two. So I'm curious to see if that will help out both sides. As I mentioned, their Phillies are looking for some hitting depth, and the Orioles are looking for a lot more reliever help for the second half of the season.
So here's a couple questions for you. After the deadline, are the Padres a legit threat to win the National League after they got all of these relievers now? Because it seems like Manny Machado's coming into it, Xander's coming into it. They got the starting pitching.
They are going to get
Now
Tatis.
they got the
soon.
relievers now.
It's tough. My problem. And listen, they have been red hot as of late. They have been one of the hottest teams in baseball. My problem was I really wanted them to add a starter, and they were looking at Blake Snell, and they weren't obviously able to get him. I think that's the only concern I have for them in the second half. If their rotation keeps pitching the way they're pitching right now, then I don't know if I would. I don't know if I want to say they're a threat. It is concerning for the Phillies that they're playing this badly as of late. I would say maybe yeah. You're gonna have a top five bullpen now after the moves you made at the deadline. If the rotation, as I mentioned, pans out the second half, you're looking strong. And as I mentioned, you'll have Tatis coming back soon. Reyes has been a great get for you. Machado, you mentioned as well, is starting to get back into a groove. They could be a very dangerous team. They've already been dangerous to start the second half of the season. Those wild card teams that we mentioned just a couple of weeks ago.
It's a very tight race out there, all separated by one or two games. So there's a couple of guys that could be contending over there, like the Atlanta Braves and the Mets are in that.
Yeah.
I mean, the Pirates are going to be Cardinals. In that situation too.
Like it's tough because there's so many teams in the National League right now, wild card race wise, that have been fighting it out for those last couple wild cards.
One of the most competitive playoff pushes we've seen in a while.
Yeah. That's why the Pirates like making those moves at the deadline. Like, yes, they might be under the radar moves that really no one might care about, but that can maybe help a team go, especially if Paul Skeens, as I mentioned during our last show, continues to pitch the way he's pitching. I mean, why not? Why not say Pittsburgh could be an opportunity to make a postseason push?
So I have a question for you now.
Yeah.
Should the White Sox sold more of their assets? Should have they gotten rid of guys like Lubob, or would they right the whole thing?
I know for a fact they wanted to trade Crochet. They weren't getting the offer that they wanted. That was the problem. So they weren't going to sell him. They did trade Eloy Menace to Baltimore, which I thought was a really good move for the Orioles. I think Eloy obviously has had injury concerns and has been not, doesn't have the hype that he used to have, but he's still a solid power hitter that could provide, if he were to come off the bench or he's just in a DH role, that's a nice that could be really good for Baltimore for the second half of the season. I am surprised Lubob didn't get traded. I thought maybe they would pull the trigger. Maybe probably another scenario where they didn't get enough that they wanted to have gotten for him um, at this deadline. So that they just said, you know what, let's just hold on to them, and then maybe during the offseason we probably trade them because that could very much well happen. We saw that. Remember that happened with Juan Soto last season. We thought maybe he get traded at the deadline, and the Padres just said we're going to hold on to him, and then they traded him during the offseason during the winter meeting. So it probably happens with the White Sox this season. The one team that I was mind boggled that didn't make a move was the Rockies, because once again they just stand pat and did not trade any of their players, and they're just continuing the same old cycle and cycle and cycle again of we have these assets, but we're not trading them to any team. We're just going to hold on to them and just continue to be mediocre at this rate. So I don't know. I don't envy being a Rockies fan. That's all. All I'm saying, Johnson, don't go to that team.
Oh, of course. I'm not even going to consider for
Rockies. Don't consider that team.
So, give me your non-biased opinion after this trade deadline. Yankees, Orioles. How's the division looking right now?
It's neck and neck still.
It's half a game separation.
Are you asking me who I think is going to win the division?
Yes.
I still have Baltimore.
Still Baltimore?
I think they made more moves that will help them at this deadline than the Yankees did. The Yankees definitely made some all right moves. They got some bullpen help. Jazz is obviously a nice addition. They were trying to get another starter, I think, but they weren't able to get that through. They almost had Flaherty, but they were concerned about some of his medical history, so they didn't want to go with that trade. But Baltimore, I think, right now has to still be the favorite. They just called up Jackson Holiday and he had a grand slam today. So maybe that's it's not a trade, but it's still a transaction that might help them. And like I mentioned, they got Eloy. I think it's a smart move. Dominguez could be a nice bullpen depth for them. Pache's also, good outfield depth. And they got Zach Eflin from the Orioles. And Trevor Rogers. They did pretty much what they needed to get at this deadline. Got pitching depth in the rotation, got bullpen help, and they got some batters in the outfield and just overall depth-wise that I think can help them hold on and secure a second straight AL East title. But the Yankees definitely will be neck and neck with them for that division race. I think it's going to come down probably, in my opinion, it will probably come down to the final day of the season to see who wins the AL East.
That's going to be a crazy, crazy situation, man. I wouldn't envy anyone.
No, I don't want to be in that scenario, but I think that's exactly what's going to happen. I think we're at that point. What was there any move that we didn't discuss that you thought, a team that you liked for a team that you think will help them in the second half? Or did we pretty much hit every trade that we spoke about that you liked?
Yeah, I guess let's talk about the Mets a little bit. What they did with their bullpen here, because they've had a horrific bullpen in the last 2 months since I'd say since the end of May.
That's been the biggest weak point of their entire season.
They get Blackburn, which you assume is a
more of a long reliever,
you get Stanek,
middle of the innings.
You get Huskar from Miami, who's also another guy that's excellent in his role down there.
Jesse Winker was a nice addition as well for their lineup.
They didn't really do anything crazy here. They just did a little. They're playing Moneyball right now, which you would assume this owner would never play Moneyball, but they're playing Moneyball for.
Well, we know why they're not adding. We know why they're not going for the big salary players right now. We know exactly why.
Well, we know why. There's a certain man in pinstripes
across
the river.
They're seasoned to get in this offseason. It's going to be a very tight race for that man. The Mets made. Listen, they weren't flashy moves, but there's certainly moves that can help them in terms of getting, keeping pace in the wild card. Because as you mentioned, the wild card race in the NL right now is insanely close. You have, 6 teams probably that were within 2 games of each other for the entire, just the entire race itself. Maybe 3 games at whatever it is. I can't really do the math off the top of my head right now. I mean, every single one of these teams had to make these moves. The Cardinals, there's a reason why they got Eric Fetty and they got what's his name? I almost forgot. Tommy Pham. They brought him back. Like they need to do that because they needed more rotation help. They needed another bat in that lineup. There's a reason why the Pirates got those two guys, De La Cruz and kind of Falefa. There's a reason why the Mets got all that bullpen help, as well as getting Jesse Winker. Padres getting all the bullpen help they could use, especially getting Tanner Scott. And the Diamondbacks' biggest move, I think, was getting AJ Puck and Josh Bell from the Marlins. I don't remember. I don't know if they made any other moves than that. I think the Braves were the only team out in the wild card race. Now that I think about it, that didn't make a move. I mean, they got Jorge Soler, I guess. I mean, obviously that paid off.
A
For them
nice
the
little
last
reunion
time.
for him.
Yeah, it paid off the last time. I mean, obviously we saw what he did in 2021 when they traded for him at the deadline, and obviously whatever the rest was history in that season. So they're hoping for a repeat. Um, I think Acuna was hurt during that run too, right?
He was.
I mean, they would love some deja vu, obviously, if that were to happen. Obviously, you don't want that to happen. I
I
know
think the Braves are going to fall out of the wild card.
it's possible. They were trying to get some starting pitching help, and they could not get it.
They haven't been too hot lately, and all these other teams around them got better. Arizona got better. San Diego got better. The Mets got better. St. Louis got better. I think they might be the odd man out here.
Yeah, I mean, they just lost Albies recently to injury too, which really hurts that lineup. That's why they probably needed a guy like Soler. But yeah, they're in a tough spot because I'm doing the math now. They're only three. So right now they have the number one wild card spot, and they're a game up on both Arizona and San Diego, and I think they're a game and a half up on the Mets. But from them to the Pirates, who are the last third team out, there's only a 3-game difference of that. So there's 6 teams in that wild card race that are separated by 3 games. So anyone could have a really it all depends on the on what your current streak is going to be going into the second half. If you go on one 5-game losing streak, that probably costs you the season.
Yeah, I would say so. But remember, a game in baseball is not like a game in the NFL or a game in the NBA. 160 plus games in baseball.
Yeah.
So, but you're right. If they do go on a 5-game losing streak with it being this tight at this point, you could be waving goodbye to your chances.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm looking at the AL wildcard race. It seems like, I want to say it's set. You have the Yankees, the Twins, and the Royals right now, the top 3. The Red Sox have been kind of on and off these last couple of weeks, which is, I thought they would be one of the last wildcard teams. Houston's still out. They're right now, I think, a game and a half back of Seattle for the division. Tampa did sell the deadline, but I mean, I liked Christopher Morel. I think that was a good addition, getting him in the Paredes deal from the Cubs. They're still technically in the wild card race. I mean, they might have sold, but they still could make the playoffs if all else fails for that team. But yeah, that one doesn't seem as enticing as the NL wild card race does because as I mentioned, 6 teams are vying for that last, vying for those 3 spots, and unfortunately 3 teams are going to miss the entire playoffs as a whole. But I'm trying to think of any other trade that was like, other than that we still haven't spoke about that I think made a huge impact for a team.
I think we really touched about all the major trades that happens with every team. We touched on the Dodgers, the Yankees. We've touched on the big markets, the small markets.
Guardians got Lane Thomas. I forgot about that. I thought that was a good move for them.
We really touched upon everything here. So unless you have any really final thoughts here, I think we're ready to sign off.
Yeah, I think we covered every move that will probably make a huge impact for these teams in the second half. It's just going to come down to, will these players pan out for these their new teams? Obviously, the Yankees have had a good start with Jazz Chisholm. Some of these other teams have had some good players, like even Morel and the Rays has had a home run in back-to-back games for them, and he's making a nice impact for that team. It really comes down to, as we know, for teams like that were selling at this deadline, it comes down to where you're going to be in 5 years with these potential prospects that you have. Are you going to be good? Or are you just going to be the same spot that you're currently at now? And I will say, though, I'm definitely not certain of who's going to win the World Series because there's a lot more, like the Padres definitely now entered the conversation for me after making these trades they made this past week. And the AL side, I mean, the Orioles were definitely were my pick to go to the World Series. I want to have faith that the Yankees can still get there. And I just mentioned Cleveland getting Lane Thomas. I think that was a huge move for them. I think that could really put them into that tier, maybe getting to the World Series this season. But I don't know. The second half is definitely going to be a very tumultuous time for a bunch of teams, but it's going to be fun as a baseball watcher
So,
to see how it all unfolds.
do any of these moves move the needle, at least for you, on potential AL winners, NL winners, and World Series winners?
Well, the Dodgers, I think definitely. I picked them to make the World Series.
They have to make the World. After these moves,
I
if they
think
don't make the World Series, there's
yeah,
a major disconnect, especially with Philly slumping.
yeah. I don't think there's the Dodgers have to make it now. I agree with that because you got Edman, you got Rosario, you got Flaherty, you got Kopech. Like you got some nice additions, and you're going to get these guys back from injury at some point down the line this season. So you're going to get them back. And the Phillies, as you mentioned, are also slumping right now. They just got swept by the Yankees today. They haven't been playing good baseball the last couple months. The Dodgers seem poised to take the top record in the NL and just, they're only 2 games back now in terms of record. So definitely in the NL side, the Dodgers probably have to make the World Series at this
They
rate.
solidified it.
Their biggest competition might be Philadelphia and San Diego, I think, at this point.
And with Philadelphia kind of slumping right now, I think it's them to lose.
I mean, they still have a good roster on paper, so you have to still consider them. Obviously, they've been in the championship series the last couple of years, so you definitely still have to consider them. But I mean, the way they're playing is definitely concerning for that team. On the AL side,
Yankees Orioles coin flip.
Yeah,
Houston as a dark horse.
Seattle made some good moves. I think will help their lineup because that's been an issue for them this season.
I think they'll solidify their playoff chances, but not the World Series hopes.
Right, it would definitely help them try to solidify winning the division because I know that was a big talking point of our recap of the first half. In terms of World Series and Championship Series, I think the Yankees and the Orioles definitely were obviously the two biggest active teams.
Houston's got to be right behind them, though. If there's a third team in that conversation, I think it's Houston.
I don't know because I did not like the Kikuchi trade from the Blue Jays. I thought they gave up too much for him. He might make a big impact for that rotation, sure, but I thought they gave up a lot for him in that deal. A lot of people did not like that trade for him. That might be bias coming out of me because I don't like the Astros, but I don't know. That was the word I got, or at least the feeling I got after hearing that trade. And they've been slumping so far out of the second half of the season. They've lost 3 straight games. Even though they're still only a game and a half back in the division. I don't know. I think to me right now, in terms of World Series, they're probably still in that conversation. But I would say it's Baltimore, Yankees, and I don't see why you have to probably put Cleveland in that conversation as well. They're just hitting the ball so perfectly this season. The only reason they wouldn't make it there is the rotation, which I thought they needed to get a starter at the deadline, but they weren't able to do so.
Yeah, it's just to me that the gap between the Yankees and Baltimore, let's say Yankees and Orioles, right?
Yeah,
they have a similar gap, right? Because they're close enough. The gap between Yankees and Baltimore, right? Yankees, Baltimore to Houston, right? Is about the same gap of Houston to Cleveland.
Mm.
Which I think, would you agree with that?
I think, well, if you look at the teams, if you look at their biggest concerns and why the gap is close between the Yankees and Baltimore's biggest concern is their bullpen. You've seen Craig Kimbrell this season; he's been brutal for them. That's why they got some reliever depth. It's not the biggest depth. That's why they were trying to get Terrence Scott, but it didn't work out. So that's definitely the concern for them in the second half. The Yankees' concern has always been the same thing. They haven't been consistent enough hitting wise. That's why they need a guy like Jazz. Their bullpen has been on and off this season. That's why they added guys like Mark Leiter and Aniel De Los Santos. Like they just needed to get some extra bullpen depth. And then for Houston, they needed another starter because they've had injury issues this season in terms of rotation. And I don't know. I feel like their lineup hasn't been as consistent as they would like to have been this year. It's still doing good numbers, but they just haven't been a consistent ball club enough to be in that spot where, yeah, they're vying for another World Series trip. I think there's definitely a concern for those 3 teams, and obviously Cleveland, as I mentioned, has the pitching issues in terms of rotation and how long will it be consistent enough. Um, but I would agree that in terms of like the gap isn't too far off, I would say, for these 3, 4, maybe even 5 teams if you want to
What
like
I'm trying
include
to
another
say is the
team in there.
gap between, let's say, the Yankees and Houston
Yeah.
is X big, right? Let's get that gap in your head, right?
Hmm.
Now get the gap between Houston, which we assume is the third best team, and Cleveland, which we assume is the fourth best team, right? I would say it's the
I'd
same
probably
size
flip it,
skill
but
gap,
yeah.
right?
I would probably flip Cleveland and Houston in my opinion. I think
Okay.
Cleveland's. I still like. I obviously record wise like
But what I'm
it
trying to say is the gap
yeah,
between the team and the third team is the same amount as the first team and the third team, which is insurmountable if you're that fourth team.
yeah. I think it really comes down to. It seems as if the Yankees and Orioles are destined to play in the ALCS if it gets to that point. I don't know how it's going to look in terms of how the season's going to turn out standings wise and how the playoff format will look. But it seems as if those are the two best teams right now in the American League, and they've definitely had their issues in the last couple of weeks, but they're still on paper, primed and destined to be the two teams fighting it out for a pennant this season and going to the World Series, and then potentially taking on the Dodgers, who we think should make the World Series after the moves that they made at the deadline. So
And one last thing before we do sign off here. We have to plug a card show. I know it's been a little bit. It's
it's been a
always
minute.
slower during the summer because there's not really too many shows every weekend, but we're going to be at the Morris County Card Show on this Saturday, August 3rd from 9 a.m. to 3 p.m. That's at the Parsippany Police Athletic League, 33 Baldwin Road, Parsippany, New Jersey. Morris County Card Show, 9 to 3 this Saturday, August 3rd in New Jersey.
That should be a fun one. Well, hopefully we get to see some of our listeners there at the show, and if not, we'll definitely try and make some new listeners for this upcoming weekend. Should be a nice show. I think we've done that show a couple times, right? I'm trying to think off the top of my
Multiple
head.
times. Always a good time.
Yeah.
And there is $500 worth of giveaways there. So every
Mm.
hour that you are there, you have the chance of just by walking through that door and paying the admission to get in, which is $5. $500 worth of prizes. So every hour you have like a raffle ticket and have the chance to win one of those door prizes, which could be something like a box of cards, a single, slab, etc., etc. But you have that opportunity once an hour during the show.
Can't beat that for $5.
Really can't.
Definitely not beat that. Yeah, definitely looking forward to that show on Saturday. It should be a fun one as all of our shows have been these last couple of years. But looking forward to that. But Johnson, as you know, probably the last time we'll be recapping the MLB season until October when we get into our playoff dive and preview what's going to happen in that. And as I mentioned on our last show, we're getting close to the NFL season as well as college football season. That is coming up on it just seems as if a couple days. I think it's 2 or 3 weeks. I think now that we'll be looking into this upcoming 2024-2025 season for both college football and the NFL. And you and I both know that is a great time here on the show, and we're going to definitely be happy to look forward to it and preview all that's going to happen this upcoming season in the world of American football, I guess is the good way to term it. But it should be a nice couple of weeks, next couple of weeks here on the show, as well as Saturday with the upcoming card show. So definitely good times to be around here on the All Gas No Break Sports Show. But as for tonight, that is going to do it for our show. The MLB Trade Deadline is over. We now are officially into the full swing of the second half of the MLB season. Which trades will pan out for teams that are trying to make a World Series championship push? What trades will help teams in the future as they try to make up for the mistakes that they've had this season and look forward to maybe the next 5 to 10 years, try to get back to this playoff push for them, hopefully. We'll have to find out how it all unfolds here in the next couple of months and the next couple of years for those teams rebuilding. This has been Nicholas Pavona, joined alongside with Andrew Johnson for the All Gas No Break Sports Show. Have a great rest of your week and see you on Saturday.